Hi, Flosstube. It's Arlene here. It's Friday, August 4th, and I have stories to share with you. So I just want to jump right in. My stories today are all because I have some new designs to share with you. I have been working on these for weeks now, literally starting the night that I was finished with the last set of designs, and I'll tell you more about that in a little bit. Um, but this has been an ongoing summer project, and I just am excited to share with you because truly there's some good stories here. So I know some of you have been kind enough to say you're looking forward and anxious to see my new designs. Others of you are very much stitching from stash and are no way interested in purchasing new things. That's fine. For those of you who are new, a few months ago opened an Etsy store. Works by ABC is my store's name. My initials are ABC, so that's how I came to be this title. I'm still struggling with the fact that I initially started this with spaces. Etsy doesn't put spaces in titles, so Works by ABC on Etsy should be all one word. But you'll see in some of my stuff, I put the spaces and some of them I don't because I'm just not consistent yet. So I'm going to jump into my stories, which is going to show you my designs. I hope you'll stay around and listen, maybe find things that you like, or if not, just share what you've enjoyed hearing about. And I'm going to start with a library book. I said once before about how much I use the library and love the libraries. The library system, borrowing from different branches. A couple of librarians loved my little comment about that. Use your libraries, folks. I'm curious to know how many of you out there are familiar with this. It's called The Grammar of Ornament by Owen Jones. It was originally published in 1856. I could tell you exactly when I first learned about it. Was the first time I went to a needlework symposium at Winterthur, which was a number of years ago, and there was this like design or workshop. It was a workshop about learning where inspiration came from centuries ago when designers and decorators were creating new things. And this book was mentioned. It was a source during the 19th century, and a lot of people in the room kind of nodded. And I said, "What's the Grammar of Ornament?" And I scribbled down the name, and I was told that, oh, it's still in print, and you could find it. And lo and behold, my library system had a copy of it. You will see, this is what, like the original book, like this size, to my understanding. You will also see versions of it that are just, well, let me show you the original. So the original, and hopefully you will get a sense, if you've never seen it before, maybe you're going to learn something new during this Flosstube, is these plates of all kinds of decoration. And Owen Jones wrote these essays. He was an influential designer during the Victorian time. And his name is not very well known. But at the same time, he was a huge influence on William Morris, like textiles, William Morris, if you've heard that name. Frank Lloyd Wright has written about, even though they totally did not overlap time periods, but Frank Lloyd Wright has written about how much he was influenced by Owen Jones's work. Because Owen Jones, in addition to decoration, he was also architectural. He's a fascinating guy. So I've borrowed this from the library many times. I've kind of wondered whether I'm the only person who has over the years. I don't know. I play this game where I renew it and renew it and renew it until I can't renew it anymore. I return it, and then I go back and I borrow it a few days later. I was planning on the very first set of designs. I want to do something from the Grammar of Ornament. But this got me started on something that I knew I needed to do, which is to learn a little bit more about copyrights and what's appropriate, because this was published in 1856. It is completely available online. You could go to archive.org, Grammar of Ornament, and you could see the full thing, including all the essays, but especially to see all of these plates. That's what they're called. And, you know, if this little peek intrigues you, you can find it all online. So that would make me think it's free of copyright and that I could use it for a cross-stitch design. But at the same time, it's currently in print. In fact, a new edition, a new printing of it just came out last 2016 or 2015. Frankly, the edition you could find nowadays, like in a Barnes and Nobles, I think they did a terrible thing in that they took like these. They say there's 1,000 images in here. You know, if you were to take each of these and break them up, and that new edition they broke up. They didn't keep the full plates, so I have no interest in getting that new edition. I got myself off track. Copyright. So, what does that mean that it's still in print? Is it still copyright free? All of that. Anyway, it was something I knew that was important for me to learn about. I had some great interactions and conversations with someone who's a copyright lawyer, and really good conversation with someone who works at a museum and knows a lot about the copyright business, and was able to ask good questions like the difference between walking to a museum, take a picture myself, using that picture for something, pulling a picture off of a museum's website when the museum says the picture's in the public domain. What does that really mean? I feel like I've educated myself, and I feel good about what I'm doing in my work with cross-stitch designs. Anyway, this is copyright free. I can use the works that are in here. Just to let you know, I'm really into Owen Jones now. There's really only one book that's what you might call a biography. It's more than a biography. This work here, and in another way you can use the libraries of your life. This was not in the library system that I have access to, but through interlibrary loan, it was borrowed from another library. That can't renew multiple times, but it was enough for me to know that it was worth it for me to own it, and I was willing to search out a used copy. What did I do with it? Well, I have visions of doing a lot of things from this book, but I started simple. I started with this plate, and as you look at it, you're going to say, really? That looks kind of boring. It's the symmetry of each of those is what I was looking for. So these are tiles that you see. It comes from Middle Ages, and another page it refers to it as medieval ornaments. And what I did is I picked out a number of them, and I'm calling this Medieval Ornaments from Owen Jones's Grammar of Ornament. And there are 12 of them. I picked 12. In the four corners you see ones that are diagonally symmetrical, very similar to fleur-de-lis designs. The others are all symmetrical, well, not the flower, but the others are very symmetrical in both directions. But they don't need to be, it doesn't need to be stitched all together. I put all 12 of them together in this front. They could be arranged or done as individuals. And I have actually stitched 2 of them. So here are 2 of my samples. And you may ask, and these could be turned into ornaments. I kind of forgot to ribbon. I could stick it on afterwards, like a ribbon to hang it, or I don't have a dough bowl or any place where I put littles, but I may need to start something like that. What's up with the off-centeredness, Arlene? Well, it's simple. When you take a little project to a lace convention, because you just need to have something in your hands at those oddball times, and you make the mistake of not starting it ahead of time, but waiting until you're sitting at a like an evening talk and starting it, and you have a very small piece of fabric that you're working with. It was only like this 9-inch by 9-inch square of this red. It was a scrap that I had. Yeah, you don't center it very well. And then you realize you've put the 2 motifs too close together. So this was the only, like, I just didn't have enough room to do much in the way of centering them, but it works. So I also did a fun little experiment, and this is greatly to the influence, or thanks to the influence of Flosstube. I posted about this on Instagram, and I think also on on Stitchmania. If you're looking closely, you can probably see that there's a difference. Those are both stitched with a metallic thread. I have used Kreinik for many years, and it's mostly been in the canvas work that I have done. I've never had a problem with it just because I've used it a lot. That said, I haven't really used it a lot on fabricy things. And watching Flosstube, I hear lots of folks complain about it in mirrors and big pieces in when you're stitching on linen or Aida or cotton or fabrics of some kind. And I don't know if I've ever, or certainly in the recent past, had a use for it on fabric. So I stitched this one with Kreinik number 4, and I shouldn't hold this too close because there are so many counting mistakes in this one. Again, this is what happens when you're working too late at night and not under good light in a giant ballroom, or when you're just doing door duty at a convention. It was fine. I didn't have a problem with it. I know Danielle Stitcherista recently posted a video where she claimed this is the worst thing in existence and will never use it. I guess it was fine. But because I happen to have some treasure braid, I thought, well, this is going to be a neat thing to do. When I finished this guy, I started another motif using treasure braid. And yeah, I can see the difference. Yeah, it's definitely nicer to stitch with. I can't deny that. So if you wish to use my little experiment as a comment on treasure braid, yeah, it's good. And I think it definitely looks nicer. So these are two of the motifs. Without thinking too hard about what I was going to do, I did that one and that one. Just fabric, oh, you can't tell very well. It's just nice. It's just got a gold sparkle to it to go with the gold sparkle on the front. So medieval ornaments, which could be done in all kinds of ways. You could stitch it in 2 colors. You could stitch it with 1 color on a fabric. And I've also, just because, as I said, the theme of these designs is stories to tell, there's a lot of writing involved. So what you're also going to get in this pattern is a whole lot about Owen Jones, the Grammar of Ornament. This is the page that it comes from, the original page that you saw that I held up, the pattern, everything else. There's the picture on the back. So there you go. That is first design. Okay, next one. I love the story behind this. I will be very curious to know how many of you, if any of you, know about this story. So I know among Flosstubers there are folks who do quilting. I've done a little bit of quilting in my life, baby quilts for my niece and nephews, little things. But I'm interested in quilting to the extent that I have some quilting books and interested in the history and so on. Some number of years ago, couldn't tell you exactly where, when, or how, I'd heard about a book that was interesting enough. Eventually got my hands on it because it's out of print, but it seems like it's actually easier to get copies of it now than it might have been, but I'm not sure, when I was first trying to get it. It's called Patchwork Souvenirs of the 1933 World's Fair. And what is fascinating about this story, so in 1933, the World's Fair was in Chicago. It was during the Great Depression. There was a quilt contest sponsored by Sears, as in Sears Roebuck, it was a big company at that time. They sponsored a contest, a quilting contest. And the amazing thing, there were 25,000 quilts that were entered into this contest. There were a series of levels you sent to your local store or your regional area, and there was level 1, I think there were 3 levels, and then the top 30 quilts were the ones that were eventually displayed at the World's Fair, and from those top 30 there was a winner. The winning quilt got a prize money of $1,000, and at that time period $1,000 was huge. So in this pattern, I've actually, again, because I think this is a good story, you're getting a 3-page essay, which is sort of a shortened version. I mean, this tells an awful lot about the background of the whole story, but this is focused very much on the quilts and the story of this. $1,000 was the final grade. Okay. This was life-changing money during the height of the Depression. A new Ford car at the time cost $490. A 3-bedroom house cost $3,000. And again, this was the Depression. So the chances of winning $1,000 by making a quilt, just picture that. And there was a particular line in here that just struck me. And again, this is how come this story isn't more well known? How come I don't read about it in the quilt books that I have? There's a line that says, we, the authors, we have also calculated that 1 in every 2,000 American women entered this contest. 1 in every 2,000 American women. And I read the footnotes, and they had their calculation of the census from 1930, and then how many were women, and the 18 to whatever age group and the math made sense to me. And again, that's a phenomenal number. So this book was published in 1993. It's out of print. You could still find copies of it. So by now, you're probably thinking, okay, tell us about the winning quilt. Well, the story of this isn't so much about the winning quilt, although it is. So the pattern that I've created is to the spirit of the winning quilt. And even as I'm looking at it now, I'm thinking of all the things I might do differently. Let me talk about the colors first. The quilt itself is lost to history. Nobody knows where it is. There's no surviving color photographs. The descriptions talk about it being in shades of gray-green that were popular in the 1930s. Gray-green. What do? I turn to DMC color card. This is what DMC calls the gray-green family. So I charted this using these colors. Now, let me show you a little bit what I can from this book. There's a picture that's in the public domain, and you'll see it in this essay. What is known about the quilt, I'm getting this in view. The prize-winning quilt was given to Eleanor Roosevelt. You can see that picture there. And, photo op. There's the Eleanor receiving the quilt. And this was a time before there were rules about presidential gifts. So what happened to it from Eleanor Roosevelt onward is unknown. There's no records. And the authors of this book did a good job trying to search it out. And, again, this book was written 25 years ago. To the extent I looked online and searched around, there's no update in the last 25 years. It's just lost to history. The best, and it was even difficult to kind of piece out, well, what does that really look like? So there's that image, that image there. And then there were, this sticky note. On this page, here. So I find it funny that up on the wall are the second and third place quilts, and these women who I think were these were the judges, are holding the first place quilt, and it's even hard to follow what the pattern is. And here, again, they're holding a piece of that quilt. There was an extra prize money if the winning quilt was in the spirit of progress, or spirit of, I think they called it progress, because they called it the century, Chicago was celebrating its centennial in 1933. So the World's Fair marked the 100th anniversary of the founding of the city of Chicago, and so the fair was named the Century of Progress Exposition. And so many of the quilts, and this book is about the whole exhibition, not just focusing on a winning quilt. And so many of the quilts had this whole thing about history and where has the world come in 100 years. And so there was going to be extra prize money if one of those quilts won. The quilt that won was a very traditional pattern. One thing that does, so after this quilt won, there were commercial patterns printed of it. So this is from the relatives, and I'll get to the story in a minute, remnants of what the fabrics may have looked like. It's not even a guarantee. That's what's written about. This could have just been practice fabric. After the quilt won, they of course capitalized on it. They created a pattern so that you yourself could make the winning quilt. This is supposedly this one was made in 1940, so relatively close to the time period. It was called during the fair the Unknown Star. By 1940, it got the name of Star of Bluegrass. This is the whole quilt. This is a detail and sort of what I based my design off of. Now, as for the winner, was it life-changing? Not really. There's an interesting story behind that. And without giving away everything of the story, how, it was a woman who maybe didn't sew it herself and maybe didn't give credit to the people who did sew it. And it's a fascinating story. And again, I'd be interested to know if anyone has heard about this story. I mean, obviously, if you have the book. But if you don't have the book, if you're a quilter, have you known about this? So while the missing quilt may be mired in some while the winning quilt may be mired in some controversy, and there isn't even a good picture to work off of it, it is nevertheless a story that sticks with me. And for this reason, I think it deserves to be acknowledged in needlework form in the making of a cross-stitch pattern. I've created a pattern that duplicates the basic design, although without needless repetition of blocks. The original had 42 diamond stars, while my pattern has just 4. And I've charted it in the gray-green colors. As I see it, anyone choosing to cross-stitch this pattern is honoring all 25,000 entries to this quilt contest of the century. So there you go, this pattern, 1933's quilt of the century. Okay, next up. My last set of designs included this pattern, which was called Vase Flowers and Leaves. And it was actually very popular last time, which I wasn't expecting. I mean, it's a lovely pattern, and I wish that I could take a survey. Why did you buy it? Why did some anonymous? And this came from a pattern book from 1557. Was the history part appealing? Is it just a nice design that everyone will have their own opinion? But because this was by far, I mean not by far, but it was a clear first place in terms of sold the most, I designed what I'm sort of calling a companion piece to it. So, and I should have made the pictures the same size. So this is called The Birds and the Bees of 1557. The bands and the border come from that same pattern book from 1557. I was looking, there was no other pattern within there that could be a good standalone, but I was looking, but a lot of bands, and I was looking at the bands and trying to find ones that would work together, and birds and bees do. So again, it's from 1557, and the border is also from that same pattern book. Again, it's very close in size. It's off by 5 stitches in one direction and 9 in the other, if you were to stitch both of them. I charted it I used all the colors that you see in this are in here, as well as a few more. To me, colors are totally personal. I would hope anyone who does this would want to do whatever works for them. But I liked the possibility. I don't know what it really, when you talk about 2 designs being companion pieces, what does that really mean? I don't know. But there you go. Birds and the Bees of 1557. Okay, so I've also, from sort of the same direction, I mentioned how I've been really intrigued by these pattern books of old, and I talked about a great exhibit that had been at the Metropolitan Museum of Art where I'd seen some of these pattern books, and how they had on exhibit some of the very items that, well, I don't know anywhere for sure that used any of these bands or this border, and any textile or anything where it was used. I was able to trace down something that was in that exhibit, and it was in the exhibit because they were able to trace down exactly what pattern books the item came from. So this design, I gotta work on my naming, people. I'm calling this simply calling this Inspiration from the 16th Century. I have it charted in 3 colors that I refer to as sepia color, 3 DMC browns that are sepia color. It could be all monochrome, it could be done in an over dye, it could be done in more than 3 colors, in all honesty. It comes from, this is a textile owned by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's an altar cloth from 16th century France. And they were able to trace out the pattern from the center comes from one book that was printed in 1532. I won't butcher the name, it's Italian. And the border came from another book that is French, I think, published in 1587. And both of those books were very popular in their times. And so, as was written, it's sort of not surprising that they could find the sources of that, or that they could look at those pattern books and say, in effect, oh my gosh, that cloth that we have, there are the patterns. So I've written a little bit about this to help explain where this comes from, because on its own, it's a little, where'd that come from? But knowing the backstory, as I think is the spirit of everything I'm showing you today, I hope makes it a little bit more interesting to you. So, inspiration from the 16th century. Okay, this next one. I kind of just giggle at every time I look at. I call it the Calendar Kids. And the story is, I discovered these, and they were separate squares, in a French booklet of filet lace patterns. And it was published just about 100 years ago. I found a couple of different dates. One place I saw it 1910, another place 1917, so somewhere around there. And I was going through this particular pattern book. There's some beautiful things, and I don't know, I have never talked about filet lace, and I would love to, and it's on my list for a future Flosstube. But this pattern book had all kinds of really cool designs, and there may be future ones coming from that book. But these were very different. Like, none of the others were figural. There were flowers and leaves and fruits and stuff like that. So I kind of clicked past these children. And then something caught my eye, and I went back. Now, I printed out the picture bigger. Okay? So it's French, you could see, and and they weren't even in order. They were not in the calendar order, okay? But eventually I picked up, it's all 12 months. And you could see, okay, January, they look like they're skating, and February, or some holiday, somewhere they dress up in some costumes. Okay, March, rain in March, okay. By April, I was like, wait a second, are you wearing any clothes? And then by May, they seem to have turned into angels because they're wearing angel wings. Now June, now that's definitely a naked butt there, okay? We got naked little kids playing around in the flowers. Now they're out doing real work on the farm, harvesting the wheat, but they're naked. But they've lost their angel wings, okay? But hold on, September, one of them got their angel wings back. October, now look, I think they're making wine because they're stamping on the grapes, okay? The other one's got the angel wings now. Now look what happens by November. They've earned their clothes back, okay? I guess it gets a little cold. December, yeah, hanging out by the fireplace, nice and tidy and warm. And I just started to get the biggest laugh over these. I couldn't understand, what were they doing in this book, and who would have filet lace, use a needle, stitch them, whatever. I thought to myself, I gotta do something I gotta do this. Now, translating this took way longer than I thought, but I think I'm gonna have to stitch these. And this is the story. I had posted this on Stitch Mania. For those of you who saw it, it was a somewhat cryptic posting, that I'm tooling along, and there was one day it was soon after I came back from the convention, not paying attention. Yeah, I charted June twice. And I mean, that was like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours of total wasted time. And I was so angry with myself. Like I literally, just because I had the screen all blown up, I'm only looking at 1 month at a time, and I just about finished. I was like, scrolled over. Wait a second, that's July over there. June doesn't come after July. Angry, so angry with myself. So, I'm just so taken, charmed by my calendar kids. If you are charmed by them, but you're not so crazy about French or foreign language on your patterns, never fear, because I admit I'm not sure what I want to do about that either. But I have charted out all the months in English. But, I've made them fit. A little funky, like look at January, but I followed the funkiness of the original patterns. And I charted them exactly as they were created 100 years ago. If you want to leave off the angel wings, if you want to put clothes on them, I just charted them as they were, because I just think they're cute. So there you go, my calendar kids. And you could do just one of them. You could do the whole thing. You could arrange them in different kinds of ways, whatever you might want to do with this. Okay, I'm going to say this is the best story. Ready for this? I think it's a good one. So, I need an opening picture here. If you are a regular Flosstube watcher, you may look at this and say, gosh, that looks familiar. And you may be looking at it thinking, I know I've seen that before, but where have I seen that before? But some of you may know exactly where you've seen it before. So McKenna, at Every Stitch Counts. And if you're not watching McKenna, I don't know why. But maybe it's just because you're new to Flosstube, in which case you have to go watch her. She is, she's got skills, let's say, when it comes to thrift. Well, she's got lots of skills, but she's got skills when it comes to finding amazing thrift store finds. And she showed this box, so she refers to it as a sewing box, in a video about 6 or so weeks ago, maybe more. It was more. And I just thought it was so neat. And it was the painting and it was the shape. And so I emailed her and I asked if she would be willing, if she would send me some pictures and maybe I would turn them into a cross-stitch design. And she was so kind and sent me pictures from all angles, and it was wonderful. Put them in my, I have a folder on my computer that I call just ideas, and I had to kind of set it aside because I was still working on my last set of designs. But the night that I did the Flosstube, got the Etsy things, everything was sort of done for that last set of designs. What did I do that night? I started thinking about this box. And what you don't see on this picture is on one side is a name. And the name is Alvild Benson. And the other side has a date of 1949. And you can assume that that was the name of the woman who owned it. And that night, I started doing some Googling. And I have nothing that can 100% prove this. Cannot prove it. But I like to say that this woman, that one right there, no, can't move my pen, right there, get it out of the, her name's Alvild Benson. And I think the box that McKenna found belonged to her. Now, let me tell you what I started doing. So that I got obsessed. There's no other way to describe this. I got obsessed about this because what happens when you're doing research like this, I'm not huge into genealogy, partially because my own family tree is really boring, but I've had a few other times where I've gotten into research, and it all starts with a name that's unusual. If the name on the side of McKenna's box had been Mary Smith, I wouldn't even Googled anything. You couldn't go anywhere with Mary Smith 1949. Alvilde Benson, Alvilde. There aren't too many things that come up. And I found a few possibilities, but was able to eliminate them. But then, when I found this picture, there was something that just got into me about finding a picture that made me just want to keep pursuing it. The picture comes from Wisconsin, and it was, it gave me her name, and there on the caption of it was Mrs. Adolph Benson, in parentheses, Alvide, so that gave me a husband's name. And I started researching. And that turns into all right, so here's some more pictures of the box. And there's her name. And I got an essay that I've written out that tells you about Alvilde. I've created 2 patterns. This is not full coverage. This is just a brown background because when I originally tried printing this on a white, it just looks, so I printed it on brown. The rectangular shape comes from the top of the box. I admit my first thing, what really appealed to me was the shape of the side. When McKenna was showing in her video. She shows it, by the way, in video number 38, about the 34-minute mark. I'll link that below if you want to go and sort of get the full vision of her sort of showing it. But I'll link that. And I'd originally created this pattern. Maybe that appeals to some of you. I did it, and then I was like, eh. But the top being rectangular felt like it had more potential. And enough potential that I stitched it. So here is my Mrs. Benson's box. So I stitched the top. I did this on a piece of fabric that I had that was 32/1. It was crappy fabric. I wish I could tell you what it was so that you don't use it. Or certainly it was not good for doing over 1. And I did it because of the size. And no one's going to believe this, but I'm telling you this anyway. So this box, this is the same box that McKenna has. And when I bought it, I did not know it's the same box that McKenna has. So there's something like karma about this. Some connection here. Okay, so this is what it could look like stitched up. In retrospect, it looked fine when I put all the threads on top of the fabric and I just got started. It would have looked better with a darker fabric. But this is my Mrs. Benson's box. In this pattern, you get both of these. Because I had it, I created it, why not? Maybe it'll appeal to some of you, but you have both of these. You have a 4-page essay about the Mrs. Benson that I found, her story, how I think. And now, I will be perfectly clear. I have no proof that this Mrs. Benson is absolutely the Mrs. Benson that owned that box. But I want to think it is. I have no proof on how, if this is the right Mrs. Benson, she lived her entire, well, she was born in Norway. She came to the she was born in 1886. She came to the United States in 1912. 1907. Spent the rest of her life in the Madison, Wisconsin area. Passed away in 1950. And then the question is how that box got to where McKenna lives. If you are not familiar with the United States geography, Madison, Wisconsin, Phoenix, Arizona, not particularly close. So I've invented, in the last couple of paragraphs, my own fiction of how it might have gotten to the area of where McKenna bought it. I love this story, people. I've been sitting on this story for weeks, and I've wanted to share it with you. And it's the spirit of when you stitch something, sometimes there's a great story behind it. And sometimes there isn't, and that's fine. But this was a case that as I was stitching this, I was thinking about the actual box, the potential original owner, the person who owns it now, and maybe how this story will interest some of you, such that you might want to stitch your own Mrs. Benson's sewing box. So there it is. And again, both patterns are in here. And all the patterns, I think, did I say this already? On the back of all my patterns, you'll see stitch counts and sizes. And I also put that in all my Etsy listings. In one of the pictures, you can see all the possible sizes. If you want to be really true to size, according to the measurements of McKenna, like the top, if you wanted to do the rectangular top about true to size, your closest option is about 40/2, so about 20 count, gets you approximately true to life. This is much smaller because I went searching for a box or a container that I can make into something. Oh, I found this. Oh, it looked right. A recent video, McKenna mentions a box and figured out it was the same one. Okay, and the last pattern to share with you is, as I had mentioned from my first time when I created Canvas Work Square #1, and if it was a popular thing, I wanted to do it again. Well, it was, and I loved how many of you purchased it. I appreciate it so much. I loved creating this. So I created Canvas Work Square #2. There are so the idea is 2 different colors of DMC, a light and a dark, plus 1 accent color. I made the conscious decision that as I'm doing a series here, I'll do all of them in different colors, just to show that it looks fine in different colors, but you may want to use the same colors going along. These are probably my favorite DMC color family. The darker one is 333, the lighter one is 155. It's blue violet. I just think it's so pretty. So Canvas Work Square #2. As with the first one, the thing that's important to me, that I am calling this a beginner pattern because it doesn't use fancy materials. It doesn't use fancy threads that you need to order special to. I give full chart, quick look there, diagrams and pictures. It's 5 or 6 pages. Tried to write it out as thoroughly as I could, and fully welcome, send me an email if you get stuck. I so thank, and I forgot to ask permission to say a name, I so thank the person who sent me an email just last week saying, look, I finished it. And I can't tell you how much of a boost that was on that particular day when I'd sort of graphed out pieces. I picked out the colors. I just needed to get started in working on this, and to have somebody who at just the right moment sent me a picture of their first one. I was like, yeah, I gotta do this. So I really loved stitching this. Once again, I am willing to sell you a piece of canvas if you would like. So you will see this listed in 3 ways. Forgot to talk about this. So I continue to be pleased with my decision to sell my patterns as both paper and PDFs. I did statistics. This is total, not just from the last set, but total of all my sales. People ask me how it's going overall. I think it's going well. I don't know what to compare myself to. I don't know how to find someone else who's opened an Etsy store selling cross-stitch patterns for the past 3 months so that I compare myself to them. I don't know. I can't compare it. You all could look if you want. You could see how many sales I have. You can look at my reviews. You can see all that. And to me, those are all positive numbers. But I'm just saying, comparing all my sales, I'm at 54% have been PDFs and 46% have been paper, which is to say pretty close to 50-50. So I'm so glad I'm selling them both. Because I now have 22 patterns, I'm going to rearrange the way the store looks so that you could just see all of one set at one time. So your best, I'm going to put in links down below. If you see one thing that you like and you just want to go directly to that, assuming this works, cross my fingers, because this was suggested to me last time, is a great idea. I'm going to put direct links below. But if you just want to look at the storefront, there'll also be a link to that. If you go to the storefront, there's an option on the side for categories, and there's only 2 categories: paper copies, PDF copies. If you are a PDF person, click on the PDF category and only those options will show up. If you are a paper copy person, click on the paper copy. Only those options will show up. And that way you're only shopping from what interests you. The Canvas Works Square will show up 3 ways. So you could buy the PDF, you could buy the paper, or you could buy the paper with a blank piece of canvas, so that you could stitch it on 18-count canvas if you wish. Somebody had asked about stitching it on linen or Aida, and what can you say? I don't think it's impossible. I meant to test some stuff out and I didn't. I'm just going to say that for another time. Thank you for listening to my stories. I've been so waiting for this day where I could share them all with you. I've been working so intensely. All right, I had a week away, and I was away last weekend, but mostly working so intensely on one or the other of these and truly loving what I'm doing. I thank you all for the support. And by support, I mean for those who've purchased, thank you. I so appreciate that. For those who've just been giving a yay, go Arlene, I appreciate that. For those who've given me the mentions and the shout outs, and particularly the mentions and the shout outs related to my creating patterns and selling them, I appreciate that. It makes such a difference. To have found something that I'm really enjoying doing and wanting to continue doing it, yeah. So thank you all very much. I appreciate all of you. Go and stitch all the things. Take care. Till next time. Okay, not until next time. What did I forget to do? Give away some free patterns. I just went to turn and saw the floor on the bowl on the floor. I did like I did last time, put names in a bowl, because I was writing them down anyway. I can do random.org. I know how to do it. I just want to do something different, because this is fun, okay? So, all the names are in here. You can do what I did last time. 3 of you? Does that sound like fun? Okay, so holding this up, one last mix around. First name. Taryn Zerbel. Wish I could remember everybody. I want to say you're in Australia, but that may not be correct. Cool. Next one. Next one. Oops, sorry. Haha. Bendy Stitchy, Michelle Garrett. That's fun when I see a name that I know. And two that I know for sure. A Stitch Too Far. Well, that was pretty cool. So, my 3 winners for today. The easiest thing is if you get in touch with me, worksbyabc@gmail.com. Let me know what you would like. It could be any of these patterns or any of my others. Anything you want. So again, thank you all so much. And till next time.